There's a certain kind of home that stays with you, not because it was perfect or styled, but because of how it felt to be there. The table might not have matched, the flowers may have been clipped from the yard, nothing about it would have made it onto Instagram, and yet it is what you remember. Today's guest, Brittany Shepard, builds her work around this idea. She is the founder of the Sentimental Decorator and co-host of the Sentimental Twist podcast, where she explores what it means to create a home shaped not just by design, but by memory, meaning, and what she calls story keeping, the act of weaving personal history, heirlooms, and everyday rituals into the spaces we live in. One of the best parts is that her perspective is personal, raised with a love of home and hospitality passed down from her mother and grandmothers. Brittany learned early on that a house becomes a home through the stories it holds and the people it welcomes. We talk about how using the good things is important now, why hospitality is not performative, and how the smallest, most ordinary rituals often become the ones that shape us. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host of the Grandma Silver podcast and founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma Silver. All right. Well, Brittany, I'm super excited to speak with you today. I want to let you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and how they might know you.
Well, I'm Brittany Shepard. I am sort of affectionately, accidentally called the Sentimental Decorator on Instagram. My Instagram account is my name at Brittany Shepard. But a couple of years ago when I turned 40, I wanted to start, posting Instagram a little bit consistently and started growing and realized that my philosophy on home and decorating kind of resonated with people. I had lost my mom when I was 33 and ended up inheriting some beautiful treasures of hers and my grandmother's. And I posted some Christmas decor one time that in the caption, I just offhandedly said, just call me the Sentimental Decorator, because everything in the photo had a story behind it. And that sort of resonated. And a friend of mine was like, you need to get that domain name. And then this dream of just having a blog and website and just really serving people who are going through maybe processing change and grief and loss and maybe bringing loved ones' things into their home kind of became a part of my trajectory, kind of talking through that process. But I love what I call sentimental style. So my home, I believe the philosophy behind home is that your home tells your story. Your story is your past and the family history, but the present and the future generations and the person you are becoming. And so your home evolves with you. And you do this through incorporating those sentimental things, heirlooms, gifted items, collections into your home to tell your story. But that's probably where people know me the most, is from Instagram. And then I co-host a podcast called The Sentimental Twist with Melissa Austin Weeks, who is at Home with the Twist on Instagram. And she is a lot about heirloom recipes and hosting and hospitality. And I'm the more meaningful decor and sentimental spaces. And so we kind of marry that love. And our podcast talks about all those things. And, we both have that experience of loss that kind of translates into our podcast. So
I love that. Well, and I'll just put it out here now that in the show notes, we'll link to all those things.
Okay,
People can
great.
find you. So one of the things, you're touching on all sorts of things that I want to make sure we explore today, but obviously this concept of sentimentality, so much of that really boils down to having a story attached to something. If I'm not mistaken, I've seen you use the word story keeping.
Yes.
Can we elaborate on this?
Yeah, so story keeping is kind of an accidental word I made up because, like I said, your home is a living story, and story keeping incorporates using those pieces in your home that remind you of the people and places and experiences that have shaped you. And story keeping is the practice of, styling your home in this way or ritualizing your home to tell a story. And also, the practical component of story keeping is writing down the stories behind those special things so that they don't get lost to time when it comes to future generations. I think a lot of what a lot of people have attached to in my content is that I'm encouraging them to tell the stories and write down the stories behind those special things that they inherited or that they collected on trips so that their children and grandchildren and future generations of their family know why they're important, whether they decide to keep them or not. The story is written down and the item is cherished. And I also, the huge thing about story keeping that I talk about a lot is things have meaning, and a meaning attaches itself to things when we use and display those important and special items. So, not saving things for someday and using them, because when they are part of your life and they become part of the memories of your home and your family, the meaning attaches itself. Those items are special. They want to be carried on to future generations. And I'm lucky because my mother and my grandmothers, both of them, were collectors. And so they had some beautiful things that I loved and was able to bring into my home. But it was a process of trying to figure out what to keep, what to store, what to let go. And so story keeping also kind of helps through the decision making process about those things. So I do a lot of this on my Instagram account and my blog, but I also have a membership community where people can become story keepers together.
Oh, so
And
fun.
we walk through this, whatever their struggle or challenge is, whether it's styling or documenting or letting go of things, we work through
Mm,
that together. So
yeah, which
that's,
is its own like process of grief in some ways.
yes, it is.
That's a whole separate conversation probably. Could you give even like a little example of maybe something in your own home that you would consider like a story keeping moment?
Probably the most sentimental item that I have is a vintage ceramic Christmas tree that my mother found for me. My mother died from cancer in 2017, and this was the last Christmas gift that she gave to me in 2016 because she knew I wanted one. And it's probably the most unique vintage ceramic Christmas tree that that plugs in and lights up. They were handmade. It has a beautiful gold ornate base on it. And to me, that is such a part of my story because she was in the hardest time in her life. I can just imagine the joy as she's like perusing the antique mall. She was having treatment in Texas and she found it. I can imagine her doing that and just finding so much joy and finding exactly what I wanted. And it was the last Christmas gift that she gave to me because she passed away before the next Christmas. And I bring it out every year. And it's a moment of remembering that, honoring her, finding joy in the fact that we had some very special times together. And then now going forward, I don't have any children, but I do have nephews and a niece, and they know the story behind that tree. And one day, I think my niece will probably be the one that inherits it, and it will be her grandmother's gift to her Aunt B, And so writing down that story, sharing that story, and displaying it prominently in my home is one of those things. But the other thing that comes to mind is my china cabinet
Okay.
and a lot of the dishes. My mother loved
We're a
dishes.
dish loving
I'm a
community here.
dish obsessed
You found your
gal.
people.
Um, but I have my mom's china cabinet, and in it is her mother's wedding china, which is Haviland apple blossom. My other grandmother had some Fostoria and pieces like that, and then my mom also collected King's Crown ruby. Additionally, my mother's mother, my granny, she collected for me a pattern called Homer Laughlin's Majestic Brittany, simply because it was my name. It is in that china cabinet as well. And when I was unpacking a lot of those things after I brought my mom's things into my home, her things, my grandmother's things that were at her house, it was that moment of like processing grief. I didn't realize I'd find grief in
Mm,
the china cabinet. But it was like grief, but joy at the same time because
very
these women,
bittersweet. Yeah.
yeah, these women just they loved having people in their homes, great cooks, great hostesses, but hospitality was the main focus. It wasn't about being perfect and things like that. And so having that china cabinet and those things that I get to use in my home and with my family and friends, it feels like the story continues in me, and now the future generations of my family will know all about those things as well. So,
I don't want to talk too much about the design of it all. I feel like that's so personal for a lot of people, but I love that you're encouraging people to do this. Not that people aren't holding on to objects. Obviously, like you mentioned, we attach meaning to
mhm,
objects. You're talking about, your mom and your grandmother being collectors.
mhm,
That can be a
it
challenge
can be.
when someone has planned a collection around their home and their life, and then it
Mhm.
is inherited and
Yes.
passed down because it's something that you care about, but it's like, well, how do I integrate this into my world?
Yes. There, it is a challenge when you bring a lifetime of someone else's treasures into your home or deciding how to bring them into your home, if you're going to bring them into your home. Because you want to honor that person, but you may not feel like you have the capacity, physical capacity to have a lot of those things, or maybe they don't fit your style. And so that's okay. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is kind of sit with the feeling that they have about the item and document the story behind those things. And then they make that meaningful decision for themselves. Do you love the item? Or do you just feel responsible for it? Do you have
Yeah.
a feeling of guilt or fear about letting it go? And so you kind of have to give yourself grace to maybe sit it aside for another day. There were things that I had to let go of my mom's and my grandmother's, and I don't feel that grief or guilt related to that because I decided I kept the story. I
Mm.
remember those things. I jotted it down in a journal, or I have what I call story cards that I share in my membership group. I knew for me, it wasn't a part of the current season of my life, nor did it fit the style that I anticipated that I would decorate my home with. And I had to come to the conclusion that I wasn't letting them down if I decided to part with the item and let it go. There were things that I parted with that sometimes I think wish I would have kept, like a couple of Staffordshire dogs. There are things that I almost let go of, like my mom's pewter collection, that I'm super glad that I kept because I did not think I'd ever want it. And so you have to give yourself grace because there will be things that don't fit and you need to lovingly let them go. Giving them to someone else that is in that sphere of influence of that person, if it's one of their dear friends or even one of your good friends who knew this person, that might be bring them more joy than it would be in your home because to you it would end up being clutter or something that you didn't feel connected to. But a lot of my mom's things, her friends came and looked through things that they wanted, and then my best friend took some things. And of course, now I have a niece, so a lot of my mom's childhood things, instead of them being in my home, she gets her little ballerina jewelry box that was from the 60s. And now she feels that special connection to her grandmother that she never met
Right.
because of that item being passed to her. So it's difficult when it comes to style. One of the things that I encourage, if it's something that you're not sure about, but it's a very good piece, like
Yeah.
valuable or vintage that is just made so well because they don't make things like they used to, antiques. Like I have a set of my mom's antique settees that she purchased that had a yellow, very threadbare at the point by the time I got them fabric, and yellow is just not a lot of the colors that I use in my home, but I reupholstered them so that they would fit the style of my home. I repurpose things and, crystal serving dishes and glassware. It's kind of this thing you see them on the shelves at thrift stores all the time because we don't really use them in entertaining like their purpose was as much unless it's like a baby shower or a bridal shower or something special like that. So I use them in different ways. Like I have a candy dish that holds my mahjong tiles. The coaster, like the ashtrays, which my grandfather was a smoker, and so a few of the really nice ashtrays. I have, and I use them for wine coasters or plant saucers. Repurposing things that have a little bit of meaning or sentimentality attached to them for a different reason might be a way to keep some of those things without feeling weighed down by them. So,
Yeah. Well, you're also addressing this other element, which you mentioned before, but that I wanted to get back to, which is using heirlooms in daily life.
mhm.
I mean, you can store them away, but like how
Right.
special is it basically to bring them out and integrate them into your
Mhm.
world? That is something that people are so hesitant to do is we are told that because it is fragile or super special or because the story is so significant that we should not touch it.
Right.
It's like a museum piece in our home,
Yes.
right?
And dishes are a prime example of this. Like you think about wedding china, like so many people, their formal wedding china, especially those like our mothers and grandmothers' ages, they did not use their wedding china hardly ever.
Mhm.
And I have the wedding china of my maternal grandmother and my parents, and I try to use them. I will mix and match them with more modern plates to give them a new look. And, you can use those things on an everyday Tuesday if you want to, just to have that memory, make the day feel a little special. I think I mentioned that I kind of ritualize my life. It's the same thing as like romanticize your life, basically,
Mhm.
but I love rituals that, you know, they help me find joy and contentment because I'm making everyday occasions and things that I have to do feel special. And so my morning coffee is in in mugs that my mother gifted me when I was a teenager because she was thinking ahead and collected dishes for me. But when you do that and you bring them into rotation in your life, they I feel like they hold more significance because they become daily connecting points to those people, to those memories, to those places. And I feel very much, my mom's been gone 8.5 years now, but I still feel her presence very much in my life because I use some of her things, and my home is filled with a lot of her things that she loved and she collected. And so, using those things and not saving them for someday is one of the biggest things that I encourage because someday doesn't always come. And I think if my mom knew she was going to die when she was 57 years old, she would have used more of her lovely
Yeah.
things.
Well,
So,
you're also touching on something like how many times and I'm guilty of this myself, and I try to use things all the time, but you open a cabinet and you're clearing things out and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this. And then you
mhm.
start storytelling.
Yes.
How nice is it if you just have it out and have that reminder all the time?
No, no. I joke that, like, don't ask me about anything in my house because you're going to get a full-fledged story about where it came from, who it came from, what it means to me. Because nearly, even if it's something that I got at the thrift store or the antique mall, there's some sort of story attached to it, about that adventure with a friend, or, if I got it on a trip,
Hmm.
or a friend gave it to me, or my mom bought it for me, whatever it may be. Everything in my home sort of has a story, and I want those stories to be in my face every day because it reminds me of all those things, that the places I've been, that I've had good times in, the family members that loved me and helped me become who I am, experiences that I've had. And I want those stories to be present in my daily life, but also for the future generations of my family so they can honor those family members as well. And I think like in this day and age, it's harder to do that because we don't have as much of that go to the old home place like you did, and
Hmm.
family reunion type things. And it's more fragmented now as far as our family relations, not in a negative way, but just because life is different and we move in such a fast pace, we don't have a lot of that as I did growing up. And I definitely know like my mother growing up and grandmother growing up. And so having it a part of your everyday, and so whenever my nephews and nieces are at my house and they ask about something, I get to tell them the story instead of it just them wondering, or never seeing it. And so, yeah, and you forget the things that you have, like you
Hmm.
said. And I try to make a habit. I love rituals, like I said. I try to make a habit of having a ritual of story keeping or basically puttering and piddling around my house once or twice a month. I like to do it on Sundays if I can, if I'm home. I might restyle a coffee table and rotate family photos out, or a sentimental trinket from a trip with a candle that I had, just rotating things so that I can see those things regularly, remember that I have them. I converted a coat closet in my living room and put shelves in it so that the things that I have that I can't keep out all the time because it would be too much, I make a habit of occasionally rotating and going through and bringing new things into light. And so their
Yeah.
stories can be in the light.
In your experience, do you find that you have attached more meaning to things that you do use than the ones that are tucked away?
I think so. Gosh, that's a hard question.
I
There
know.
is
I don't know if
because
that's, it's like
there
such
are
a personal
certain things,
question, really.
there are certain things that I don't use as often. For example, really nice silverware that you have to hand wash. I don't use them as often because the
Super
hand washing
convenient.
can be a little
Yeah.
inconvenient, but I still attach a lot of value to those things and I use them for special occasions. But then my everyday silverware that I can put in the dishwasher, it's kind of crazy because it means a lot to me too because my mom, I don't know if she just had some foresight, and I'm praise God for it because we didn't have the experience of me getting engaged in her life, her life, and going through the process together of registering for china and dishes and things like that. So when I was 15 years old, she picked out the Southern Living at Home, which was the direct sales program for Southern Living for a while, gallery collection dishes and serving pieces and silverware. And she gave me, or she and my dad gave me a place setting for every birthday and Christmas until I had about 10 of every piece. And so that's my everyday silverware. And it is very meaningful to me because of that, like I look back and it's kind of like the providence of God when I think she got to do that for me and with me,
Not even knowing what
not even
was
knowing what
ahead.
the future would hold,
Yeah.
you know. And she did that with a Christmas china as well. So my
Wow.
Christmas china is Fitz and Floyd Winter Holiday. And it means so much to me to bring it into rotation at Christmas time and use the teacups and saucers for my coffee in the mornings during the holidays because she picked it out and she thought of me in that way when I was still, too young to think it was important. So,
Yeah. What about like because especially with your perspective of having lost your mother and then those objects that she was able to share with you being so now sentimental and meaningful to you, do you approach your own like sourcing of new or even new to you objects with
mhm.
similar sentimentality? Are you
Yes.
thinking of those sorts of things now?
Yes, I call it adopting heirlooms.
I love that.
I love to shop an estate sale just as much as the next girl. In fact, my house is my best estate sale find. I came to the estate sale for the lady that built this house and lived in it, and until she died, and found out it was for sale, and I bought it. But I love to thrift shop, and I love to go to the antique malls, and you have this feeling at estate sales sometimes, and antique shops, like you feel sad that these things are not a part of these families anymore. And so I
Yeah.
encourage if you don't have a lot of heirlooms, especially if you don't have things that were handed down to you, adopt someone else's and let that story continue through you. And I have a few pieces that I've adopted myself. An Amish cupboard that was my first like big girl purchase that lives in my kitchen, and it's part of my story now. It's where my cookbooks live. It's where all the dog supplies live, and my grandmother's blue and white and my mother's pewter are in that Amish cupboard that I bought myself. And it feels like I'm continuing the story. I don't know anything about where it came from or who it came from, but it somehow ended up in an antique store, vintage market. And I feel like I can honor whoever the person was that acquired it first, that fell in love
Yeah.
with it, and brought it in their home by continuing its story in mine.
It was funny when you said you feel a little sad because I sometimes get that way. Like when I walk into a thrift store or in a estate sale, I sometimes feel almost like I've walked into like the dog pound.
I know, it's like
You know,
cast-offs.
because you're like, who didn't want you? Who
Right.
didn't love you? I will. I'll take all of you
Mhm.
home.
I
It
know.
really is that feeling. Kind of shifting back though for a second. You've talked a little bit about the grief that can be connected to objects,
Hmm.
the memories that stir those feelings up. Was was there always a time where using those pieces has it always been a comfort, or were there times where it shifted from like a little bit painful to comforting?
When my mom passed away, it was November. So we were going into Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it felt really hard to want to celebrate the holidays without her. And so that first year was a little more grief, obviously, with those things. I didn't do as much those years, although, my first nephew was born a couple of days after my mother died. So
Wow.
we kind of plowed through the grief to make it a special time as well for him. But over the course of the next year, we didn't have an estate sale for her home until the summer after she passed away. And so I spent a lot of time in her home, like deciding what to keep for myself, my brother and sister-in-law doing the same for things that they wanted. And I think through that process, it turned into joy because I got to recall using them as a child, things that were a part of my childhood that were hers, and how exciting it was now that we have this new generation of our family carrying that on. So I think that first Thanksgiving and Christmas was the most difficult, and I think that's the same regardless of whether you have things that you're inheriting and bringing in. But like that first experience without them was
Yeah.
really hard, and there was a lot of overwhelm to it, and so I didn't really um, try to address it.
Right. You
But
need to be in the right headspace to even
right.
get there. Yeah.
But I'm fortunate in that I've always had sort of this outlook of I'm a believer, I follow Jesus, so he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And so my faith really propelled me to try to find the goodness of God through the hard things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the physical elements of seeing that goodness is having pieces of her in my home
Mm-hmm.
and being fortunate to be able to use those things. So it was a gradual process to it being more joy centered, but it was a lot faster than maybe I would have expected it to be. We all deal with those things in our own time frame and timeline, and grief never ends. It just changes.
Yeah.
And so there are times when even now, this far removed, those items do bring about more feelings of loss and unfairness. Like I feel like it's not
Mhm.
fair that she's not here. But then again, the gratefulness that I had the 33 years I had with her, and being able to have those things as a reminder gets me over the hump
Yeah.
eventually of that moment. But yeah, I would say it took a good, a year.
Yeah, and I thank you for sharing that because I know that was a personal question and that's a very personal journey. But for folks who are listening who are perhaps in a similar situation, hopefully your experience can
Yeah.
shed a little light on that for them. Not to like completely switch gears,
No,
but I want to ask you a little bit more about, you touched on ritual and
hmm
how that's a really big part of your life. And so could we talk a little bit about a ritual or two? I think you mentioned the coffee in the mug. But are there others that you repeat, obviously, as ritual does, that has quietly shaped your home
hmm
and your experience there?
Well, I mentioned Sundays. If I have time on Sunday afternoons, that's sort of my restyling, puttering ritual. And it involves, probably a nice beverage, another cup of coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, but I try to switch to decaf in the afternoons. I like hot tea. I like to make it in something that's meaningful, using one of those cups and saucers or that the mug from the set that my mom gave me. So I'll do that. I'll put some good music on or a podcast because that's also my favorite thing to putter to is podcasts and audiobooks. And then I will completely clear a surface that I'm ready to freshen up and dust it. And then I have a little bit of a formula that I use when I'm styling a vignette or a surface and something living, even if it's fake, like a faux orchid is fine, and something sentimental and something that glows. And so a candle or a small lamp or something. And so I kind of play with that. And that is like a ritual of connecting to me and to my home, and to my family members and loved ones or experiences that those items represent. So that's one ritual. That's probably the main one that I would share that's most relevant to story keeping. But I have a bit of a coming home ritual after work, and it's more about like switching off my work brain and being into my home brain. And that involves coming home, the dog, I have two geriatric pups, letting them out, playing with them for a little bit, and then I go around and I turn the lights on and I try to put some music on. I have sort of a coming home playlist, and I will light some candles if I feel like I want to send a candle or something like that. And then I live alone as a single gal, and at least one or two nights out of the week, it's cooking dinner and it's sitting down at the table that I sort of set, but not like formally set,
Mhm.
where I'm using those items, those dishes that I love because I'm obsessed with dishes. We talked about that. And so that's kind of my coming home ritual. And then I do my evening routine and things like that before I settle in and watch a little Parks and Rec or something like that. But
Love
um,
it.
so that is the other ritual that pops to my mind the most. So
Yeah, I love that. Do you're talking about kind of this puttering, which I do too. So, could we talk for a second about I just feel like because we talk a lot about design on this podcast.
Mhm.
So, I think there's a lot of if we go out in the world and like the home goods of the world, like listen, I
Mhm.
love walking around home goods.
Me too.
Don't get me wrong.
Me too.
But do you think that there is anything to those rituals and kind of revisiting the pieces you already have over novelty of
hmm
something new in building kind of like that sense of home and authenticity and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I love home goods, and I love bringing something new home just as much as the next person.
Yeah.
But I do find that when I do this with puttering and I bring something new into rotation, not new, something that I haven't seen in a while, or I
Mhm.
rearrange something and move something from another room to another space, it feels almost like that same dopamine
Yeah.
hit that it's new, it's fresh, it looks different, and it maybe tricks the eye a little bit. Like I'm a chronic rearranger, not necessarily the big pieces of furniture, but I do occasionally it snowballs into one piece of furniture moving and then the whole house is
Yes.
rearranged.
Yeah. It
But
starts
like,
with the vase, and then you're like, you know what? It would just look so much better if the couch was on the other side of the
and then I do the lamps and all the things.
room.
But I think that for me, because story is such a part of my design philosophy, if you will, it brings those stories back into light that maybe I haven't had in those common places that I see every day. I have a little corner on my kitchen counter that's always kind of styled. It's got a little lamp there and it's got a few cookbooks and my vegetable bowl that all my veggies are in that I'm going to cook. But like switching out the platter and a few of the little things, that gives me, it feels fresh and it feels restyled and it brings something different. I like to do it seasonally, so I have like a fall platter in the fall in the corner there. Like my grandmother's Johnson Brothers Friendly Village is what I use typically during the fall and winter months. In the summer or spring, I use Port Marion Botanic Garden, which is a new to me collection. It gives me the same dopamine hit than buying something new and bringing it home, that by bringing those stories into a new light or in a different spot does. And as a rearranger, it's fun. It's fun to freshen. And of course, like it always ends up being way more of a project than I intended it to be because it snowballs, like I said. But that gives me so much joy, just as much as buying something new. So
Yeah. I do. I feel like the snowball is almost like it sparks a creativity in
it
us.
does.
I like to think because I do the same exact thing.
Mhm.
Like what starts, and it's so hard now because I have a baby. So sometimes I haven't even been starting the project because I know it'll snowball and then I'll just go crazy because it'll all be
Yeah.
unfinished. It does. It gets like that creative juice flowing, right?
Yeah, you get in a flow, like
Yeah, it is
and
my
then
flow state.
I was one of those little girls who rearranged her room all the time.
Same.
So, it just kind of carried over into
It's
adulthood.
incredible. I think about now, I'm like, how was I even moving that dresser at like the age of 8? I
I
don't
know.
even know how I was pushing it across the room. You mentioned like the ashtrays. I
Hmm.
think it's something that's fun to do seasonally, even if you're not someone who wants to commit every Sunday to it, right?
Right.
Like even if you're doing it seasonally, I find that we bring out different things different seasons. And so there are times where I have pieces that for us it's our basement. I put things down in the basement. I'll have something that's, fresh out for the season and then I'm like, "You know what? I need something to put this in." Or what could I
Uh-huh.
put those, holiday Hershey Kisses in? Or,
Mhm.
you mentioned like your candy bowl holds your mahjong tiles. So I
Yeah.
think it's worth encouraging people to give that a try if it's
Hmm.
not something you already do, because it is really interesting when you start to just think about things outside of their official purpose and just think about what you need or
Hmm.
what you're looking for. It's incredible what you can come up with once
Oh
you
yeah.
say like, oh, well, that could hold this or that.
This is the first time I've ever thought of doing this because I've been holding on to this particular item, not really knowing what to do with it, but it was my great grandparents' like golden anniversary. It's this like Benton lidded jar that has 50 in gold with like a gold rim. And it's small. It's probably like 4 inches in diameter. And it just has been on the shelf and I'm like, well, I could put candy in it or I could do. Well, I bought a grocery store orchid and I just wrapped moss around the actual like plastic orchid cup and
Hmm.
put it in there without the lid. And it has brought me so much joy because I think about both of my mother's grandparents made it to 50 years and her parents made it to 50 years
Wow.
married. And so that is a legacy that I like to honor. And I've just never been able to use this 50th anniversary thing because I just haven't had
Yeah.
a good way to do it. And now it holds an orchid and it's on my kitchen table and it makes me so happy. And then I see it and I think about those three sets of my grandparents and great grandparents and their marriages and their lives and what they built when I
Yeah.
see it. Just bringing things out and using them in unique ways is really is fun. So,
Well, I love that you just touched on honoring a legacy. Sometimes that's why people won't hold on to an object because it's like, of course, we want you to, not to get like Marie Kondo on everybody, but you want it to spark joy, right? Like
yeah.
you want to love it and keep it for
Hmm.
a reason. But a lot of people will get rid of things because they take it too literally,
Right.
right? So some people might see that and be like, oh, that's so special, but what am I going to do with a cup that has a 50 on it?
Right. And for me,
You
like I'm
know?
not married. Like I'll turn 50 hopefully, but I'll never have a 50th wedding anniversary. I've put that thing in the donation pile multiple times. And then now I'm like, why don't I just use it it doesn't, have to be because of me and I don't have to
Right.
translate that to me. But yeah, I agree. it helps you look at things a little bit differently if it doesn't apply directly to you. You can honor the
Yeah.
legacy and what it means.
No,
So,
I love that you brought that up because I talk about legacy all the time here, and this whole conversation is really a conversation about legacy, but to be able to remind people that it doesn't have to be so quite so literal to be
mhm,
honored,
exactly.
is really special. You have a lot of entertaining pieces, or are you someone who
Yes.
likes to entertain?
Yes, I do.
Okay, okay. Didn't want to make
I am my
assumptions, but
mother's child.
was she an
I
entertainer?
Yes, very much so. Both my okay, so her mother was like the cook in the family.
Okay.
Everybody knew Granny Ella or Ella's cooking was the best. And I'm from a small town in South Georgia, so home style cooking, things like that. My mom, she was the host for all the town's showers. She was the lady that they called on. And my grandmother, her mother was the one that had all the white tablecloths, the eyelet and the embroidered tablecloths. And now I have all those things. So, yes, entertaining is, I really love to host. I really love to honor my friends and the experiences in their lives. I had a bridal shower at Christmas time or a baby shower for another friend. And I love to celebrate those milestones in my friends' lives. But I'm typically more of a casual hostess in general. Like I have a group of friends and we do a Sunday supper, not every
I love
Sunday,
that.
but it's an excuse to
Yeah.
have people over, to invite them into my life and to my home. And then we just sit around the table. I do set it, but it's nothing super formal. We usually eat family style or serve yourself. And it's just a way to connect like before the work week begins and before we probably don't talk to each other for 5 days because our lives are so busy. That's something I learned from them specifically and from Melissa, the co-host of the podcast. That's her kind of main niche, if you will. She is all about like hosting and hospitality, intention, not perfection.
Yeah.
And I learned that from my mom and watching my mom and grandmothers. Like everything ended up being beautiful and lovely, but the attention was not so much on that, but on the guests and having those people feel included in your life and special and important, even if it was just a casual meal that people like my grandmother always cooked a big lunch because my grandfather was a farmer. And
Mm.
so he would come home at lunch and he would probably have 4 or 5 people in tow almost every day that ate lunch at her house. And it just felt very welcoming and casual, but she made it an occasion every time, not intentionally trying to be impressive, but it was just her in her DNA.
Yeah.
And, things like that I look at hospitality as like hosting is the event, the party, the occasion, but hospitality is having people in your life, inviting people into your life, letting them sort of forget the woes and the things that are going on outside of that moment with you.
Mhm.
Or if they want to talk about those things, like giving them the space and freedom to just be relaxed, be cared for, be tended to a little bit outside of their normal schedule.
Being someone who's on Instagram, do you feel like social media is deterring people from hosting or gathering because everything like needs to be on a picture now?
I think there's pros and cons to social media, obviously, in
Yeah.
all things. And I do think if you have this tendency to compare
Hmm.
or seek to be perfect because of something you've seen, then social media is not healthy when it comes to those kinds of things. But I use it for inspiration. I think a lot of people use it for inspiration. And I think the biggest thing that we try to talk about on our podcast when it relates to hospitality is just do it. Like, don't worry if it's perfect. Just we joke that Olive Garden should sponsor our podcast because somehow they come up in every single episode. I learned that you could get a tub of Olive Garden soup, like a gallon of Olive Garden soup. And so I do that a lot when I'm having casual get-togethers and I don't have time to, you don't have to prepare everything from scratch to have
Yeah.
people over. So get a tub of soup from the Olive Garden and salad and breadsticks and just have people in your home. And so I guess social media can definitely be a source of comparison, a source of feeling like you have to have everything perfect,
Yeah.
perfection. But I think one of the things that I try to do, and one of the things that we try to talk about on our podcast is specifically don't lean into that. Lean into the fact that you're just loving on people and
Yeah.
inviting them into a moment of low pressure for them.
No, and I love that philosophy. I mean, I separately, so my background is kind of all over the place. I have an anthropology, archaeology background, but then I
Cool.
ended up opening a wedding planning company. And then, I mean, it's just everywhere.
Mhm.
But I really felt like I was so attracted to event planning because it was during a time when no one was gathering. events like milestone events were really when you would see people.
Right.
And there was so much more to it that I loved, like tradition and culture, and I loved being
Mhm.
part of people's love story, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there, there was the design element. I mean, it was
Hmm.
there were so many reasons to love it, but I did find that that was almost like a case study in gathering and
Hmm.
trying to understand people's rituals.
Hmm.
Because was privy to so many conversations about like, oh, I haven't seen you since so and so's wedding, or
Hmm.
and that to me was so sad.
Hmm.
More people are starting to gather,
I do too.
but
Yeah.
I do fear that there's also this generation on TikTok that's obsessed with Martha Stewart and thinks that it has to like look like it's a Hamptons garden party. And I do fear that
Mm.
we're sort of getting back into perfection.
Yeah.
Everything is photographed now. So
Right.
it's like if it's not photo perfect, can
Hmm.
I still do it?
Yeah.
So that is something that I personally fear. Like I hope people continue to just use it as inspiration because I agree. Like I'm
Yeah.
a Pinterest girl. Like
Yeah. Me
I
too.
love to use social media for inspiration. But I do fear that people will, the same way they take objects quite literally, that they will
Hmm.
take,
Yeah.
you know,
I do. I think also too, this is recently, I haven't really thought about this as much, but the flip side of not the perfection side, but the feeling like you do too much side.
mm,
Lydia Menzies of the Supper Club, I don't know if you know Lydia. She recently was a guest on our podcast and she brought to light like lean if the pretty and the tape like the beautiful tablescape is something you love doing and makes you feel excited and find joy in and you love that creative process, lean into it, don't try to hide it, because I think some of us go the other direction and we downplay because we don't want to look like we're too much. Everybody's different, we all come from different backgrounds, experiences, different mindsets, different philosophies, and social media can be good and bad for all of us in one way or the other. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves that it is social media meant to show us the highlight reel of most
yeah.
people's lives. And we talk about that a lot, but just culture today.
Well, going off of, I shouldn't use them interchangeably, but like hospitality, but also the entertaining aspect. As someone who has a lot of pieces in your home that have stories that are also beautiful, do you ever find that they're sparking inspiration for you to gather?
Yes, because I want to use them.
Nope.
And
Yeah.
so I think having them is my motivator to host more often, to put them in practice, to put them
Yeah.
in use. For example, that the bridal shower I did at Christmas, my home is just a storybook at Christmas because it tells nearly every piece of decor. There's nothing really new besides the new twinkle lights and things like that. Most of it is from my childhood or from my grandparents. I have a whole tree that's shiny bright ornaments that were my paternal grandmother's, and then I added to the collection because of obsession. But I live alone and I'm the one that sees it the most. Of course, now I share it on Instagram. But when my friend got engaged, I was like, oh, I can host a bridal shower for her at Christmas. And it could be Christmas themed and ornaments. And because
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to honor her and this milestone in her life, but also like have my things into use and use the punch bowl that was my grandmother's and the serving pieces that came along with that winter holiday Fitz and Floyd pattern that my mom gave me, that I might not, because of their actual use is a little more formal than I would use in my everyday life. It gives me an excuse to host things
Yeah.
and encourage me. And also it's a source of inspiration like for styling or even like what I serve because I have certain things that are for specific use usually, with serving
Hmm.
pieces, and so it makes it easy for me when I have a deviled egg tray that's important as I'm gonna make deviled eggs or I'm gonna have deviled eggs so that I can make use of the deviled egg tray and little things like that. So having them does prompt me to host more or find excuses to host more and have occasions so that they can be used and not kept on the shelf all the time.
Is there anything that you used to never use, but now you're like, I'll never save it for later again? I mean, you sound like you've been historically pretty sentimental, but
Yes, all of my life. Okay, so the Fitz and Floyd Winter Holiday Christmas china, I felt like I love it so much, and I felt so worried that I was gonna break something. So that took me a while to like work into using it. And I now at Christmas use the cup and saucer for my Christmas coffee that I have every morning during the holidays. That's one thing that took me a while to really use. And because it like lived in boxes in my childhood bedroom until I had an apartment. Then it came to the apartment, but then I'm like, apartment, this fancy Christmas china. Like what? Until my mom died, really, I was a save it for later kind of girl. Save it
Okay.
till I get married. Save it. But what, I mean, I may never get married. So I had to come to this like moment in time. And I think the process of losing my mom through her cancer battle really made me look at life a little bit differently and like, why am I waiting for this future that may never come to bring these beautiful things into my life to find joy in using them? Part of my coming home ritual I forgot to mention is I always get to make a beverage something. I'm not much of an alcoholic beverage person. I mean, I have a kidney transplant, so I try to like honor my donor's kidney. But I will almost always pour my LaCroix in the afternoon because I almost always have a limoncello LaCroix when I get home from work in a wine glass or a nice cocktail glass so that
Yeah.
it feels elevated and feels special in the moment. So using those things, and I probably didn't do that until more recently in the last couple of years.
It sounds like so much of your daily life, though, is like you're surrounded by it. So it's probably hard to even call that to attention. You know, you kind of mentioned like everything with your mom really shaped
Hmm.
the importance of what this all was for you and kind of propelled it forward. Did you also find that that has made it easier for you to part with things? And I ask that because you said something and it just triggered this thought in my head of, oh, when we were talking about, you were like, oh, well, I may never get married. And for me, it was, I may never have kids. But I
Mm.
was very focused on, like, I don't know if I should keep this. Like, what if I don't end up having one? And
Right.
I was always kind of hemming and hawing about, like, if I should keep something or save it. Or I have always been such a saver and so sentimental. And there are pieces, you know, I have a petite keep trunk and I keep my son's things in it now. And at first, it was really hard to not just put like every little outfit in there.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is then I have a couple of girlfriends who've also just had babies. I was really blessed. I had so many baby clothes, and one had a child that was much smaller than anticipated. I ended up throwing some things in there that I thought I was going to save. Something shifted. Like
Yeah.
there was this shift like, well, that's okay. Like we already had our memory with it, and I have the story, you know, it's in my head,
Yeah.
like you kind of mentioned before, and like I'm okay to part with it because like it can have new life.
Exactly.
But in
That,
originally it was like, but what if I have another baby one day?
right.
I should keep all of it. And it's
Hmm.
like, you know what? But like this baby experienced it and I can part with it.
Right. It's hard to make that decision, but the joy behind the decision that part with something because it's going to bless someone else or they're going to find a lot of joy in
Hmm.
it. You know, there's a few pieces of my mom's that I really wanted. If I could find them now in a thrift shop or whatever antique mall, I would. But my sister-in-law really wanted them. Now I go to their home and I'm so glad they have them.
Yeah.
And I might still, if I come across this beautiful green majolica planter that she has, then I will buy it. This, if it's the same one. But she loves it so much. It's on their dining table and they see it all the time. And now the kids, they see it. So it's this feeling of like I transferred that meaning and that joy to someone else. And like I said, my best friend has a few things of my mom's, especially some of her Christmas. My mom was the queen of Christmas and she had way too much Christmas decor. And so she collected Jim Shore and she collected Fitz and Floyd. And so Anna, my best friend, took a few of those pieces. Now when I go to her home at Christmas, it's amazing because my mom is there in her home. I mentioned the jewelry box to my niece. Like I
Hmm.
always had that in my guest room has the twin beds that I grew up in. I call it the kids room because it has a lot of childhood mementos from my childhood, my brother and I, and then also my parents as children. And so that jewelry box, had its styling moment in that room for years. And now when my niece was, 6 at Christmas, I was like, she will get so much more joy from this than I do, it just sitting on display at my house. And so it has a new life with her. She'll probably keep it forever because finding that she's as sentimental as I am. So,
Yeah. The joy keeps going. Yeah.
and for a while, I would not have wanted to part with that because I would have thought, oh, I might get married and I might have a daughter. Why can't someone enjoy it now? It does help a little bit. It's a little piece of that person that thing came from with other people that I love and that they love.
Before we part ways, I want to remind everybody that I will put links in the show notes, but if they're listening and they are just like on their phone right now, what could they look for from you? Where can they find you? Let's talk about that for a
Okay.
second.
The best place and kind of the source of where everything comes from is following my Instagram at Brittany Shepard. And Brittany is Brittany, and Shepard is Shepard. So both my names can be spelled multiple ways. So that gets a little complicated. But that's kind of the landing page for everything. I do have a website. It's the sentimentaldecorator.com. And from there, you can read my blog. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter called Sentimental Sundays. And you can also explore my membership community called the Storykeeper Circle. It's a membership of kindred spirits, is what I like to say. We gather for workshops once a month that's centered around a story keeping theme. And we have a resource usually available. I mentioned story cards at some point where people can document the stories of the items that they want to preserve. And I encourage them to write it by hand because there's nothing better than handwritten memories. And then they can attach it to the piece of furniture or the back of the piece of art. We have coffee chats, just where we get together on a Saturday morning every other month and catch up on life with each other. And then I have guests from time to time. Recently, I had a certified photo organizer named Kate Bagley come and share about, how to organize and work through the boxes upon boxes of boxes of printed photos that you may have from your family, and then also how to organize and preserve digital photos, which, if you're like me and have 20,000 photos in your phone, that can be very overwhelming. But that in the membership community, it's really just a kindred spirit gathering place, and we talk about heirlooms and legacy and adopted heirlooms and the stories behind those things and support each other as we may be processing loss from losing someone and bringing things from them into our homes or sorting through those things. We do have a decision-making framework we work through to help them make those decisions. And even some of the ladies are at the point of downsizing. They're getting older and, wanting to kind of prepare for their children, make
Mm.
it a little easier for their children. And so it's a great group of ladies, and we have such a good time together.
I had a great time speaking with you. I could
Yeah,
have
me
asked a
too.
thousand more questions and kept talking, but I just thank you for taking the time to be here today. This was so wonderful, and I'm so glad to introduce folks to your world, and I think they will enjoy exploring. I know they will just because of this audience.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it so much too. It's been really fun.